Welcome to the Patient Navigation Barriers and Outcomes Tool, or PNBOT for short. I'm going to demo the PNBOT for you today just to give you a brief overview of what's included. We will be releasing additional support materials such as a user's guide and additional videos to go in depth a little bit more on how to do specific tests and how to use the tool. So today's video will be more of a brief overview of what's in the tool and getting set up. So the PNBOT was designed for oncology patient navigation programs of any type, and it is completely Excel-based, so as long as you're running a version of Windows Excel from 2007 or later and have a decently fast computer, you should be able to use PNBOT. When you first download it from the website, Microsoft Excel will probably include a few warning messages just to prevent you from downloading a dangerous file from the internet. So the messages may look a little bit different depending on your version of Excel, but in my version it looks like this. Protected view, I have to click Enable Editing to get out of just view-only mode. And then I also have to enable macros, so it says security warning, and I have to click Enable Content, but your specific language may look a little different. Because it is important to note that PNBOT, even though it is an Excel file, its extension is .xlsm, which means that it is a macro-enabled workbook. So there's some programming embedded in the workbook that makes it run and have special functions. So macros need to be enabled to run the PNBOT. Okay, so basically when I open the file, the first thing I see is this home sheet over here, which is basically my control panel from which I could do any number of navigation tasks. So I can enter data, I can look up patient information, encounter information, case information. I can look up follow-up due for today or all upcoming follow-up. I can document a patient's story or any sort of correspondence that I just sort of want to put in my pocket for later in case we need a quote for a grant application or anything of that sort. Or I can also take care of some more data management and evaluation related tasks over here, such as setting up and customizing the PNBOT, looking at the raw data in spreadsheet form, and running reports. So the first thing I'm going to want to do when I download PNBOT is to set it up. So I'm going to click on PNBOT Setup to take me to that sheet. Again, macros need to be enabled, and then I can use a checklist on this sheet to choose which information I want to collect. We opted for including a very large number of variables just because we realize that patient navigation programs are very diverse. You all operate at different points in the cancer continuum and work with very different populations of patients. So the information that might be interesting to some navigation programs may not be interesting or relevant to others. So we really allow you to make the decisions on which variables you'd like to use or would not like to use. So basically, at the patient level, we include a client ID or unique identifier for each patient, name, date of birth, age, navigation, intake date, or the first time the patient interacts with a navigation program. But beyond that, it's up to you whether you want to collect insurance information, contact information, caregiver information, or demographic information about the patient. You can make your selections by selecting or deselecting for any of the variables listed here. At the case level, we included case ID, number of cases or cancer episodes per patient, a case start date, and a case close date. But beyond that, again, you can choose whatever variables you want to use. And we make the distinction between case and patient because a patient can have multiple cases if, for example, they get navigated for an episode of breast cancer, and then, maybe after their treatment is completed, they don't need services anymore, or they lose contact with the navigation program and they're okay. Later on, 3 years down the line, perhaps they have a recurrence or they have new needs and need navigation services again. The circumstances the second time around might be very different from the first time around, so we want to treat them as two separate cases or navigated episodes of cancer. And that might make a little bit more sense after I go through some of the variables included here. So that would include the patient navigator assigned to the patient, the location or facility name, the cancer type, the stage, metastatic sites, if it's recurrent, the various dates that the patient moves through the cancer process, such as a screening date, biopsy date, date of first oncology consult, etc. So these might be of interest if you're interested in timeliness-related reports, treatment types, and information about the healthcare team, etc. Those are all available for the case level. And then you can also document information about each navigation encounter. And what I mean by that is each time that a navigator makes contact with the patient or does something on behalf of the patient. So we included dates of encounter, general notes, barriers, navigation actions, and outcomes, but you could also select navigation staff name, the number of minutes spent on each encounter, and the date that follow-up is needed after each encounter. So that's a pretty extensive list of variables. You may opt to use none of the additional variables by unchecking all, or all of them if you want really comprehensive data collection by checking all, or somewhere in between. So if for whatever reason, there's a variable that's really important for your program to collect that hasn't been included, if you're interested, you can actually add custom variables here of the patient type, the case type, or encounters type level. And you can do that through this table included here, which I won't get into now. Or if you're happy with the list of variables, there's nothing additional that you need, you can just completely ignore this section and move on. So just make sure you save the file after you've customized it to what you want it to look like, and make sure everyone in your program is on the same page so everyone's using the same set of variables. And we've actually already entered 2 example entries into each of the different forms just to get you started so you can see what it looks like. Please do not delete the example entries out of the form until you've added at least 2 of your own into each of the different forms. Okay, but don't forget to delete them when you need to run like real reports and that sort of thing. So once you're set up, you can go back to the home screen, and I'm just going to breeze through what some of the other parts look like. So the patient data entry form I can get to from here. I can make a new patient record to enroll a brand new client. I can get a new client ID and auto-generate ID numbers or make up my own. And then some of the fields are text type fields, so I can just type in there. But for example, for insurance, there's a structured drop-down list that I can pick from. Navigation intake date was populated with just today's date, but if I click on it, because it's a date type field, I can use the calendar widget to specify whatever date that I want. And there are also some notes fields if you want to write longer comments to yourself. So all the things that we checked off in the setup sheet are here. And the grayed out boxes are ones that get automatically populated. So for example, if I put a date of birth, June 6, 1970, and I scroll down, you'll notice that the current age field is grayed out, and that's because it's automatically generated. I know that the patient is currently 46 years old, and that's calculated from today's date and the patient's birth date. So you might see some of those throughout the data entry field. So I'm going to skip around. This isn't necessarily the way or the order that you would normally go through the data entry process, but I just want to show you what the sheets look like. You have some navigation buttons up here, so you can jump to case data entry, you can jump to encounters data entry, or testimonials data entry. You can look at, raw data sheets, and you can always click on the blue little robot to get back to your control panel. You can look up patient information by selecting a patient in any of the yellow boxes. You'll notice a drop-down come up. So I can clear the current selection by hitting the backspace button, and that will clear all the fields in the data entry form. And I could just click in the yellow box and use the drop-down to select from the patient list. I can also start typing. part of a patient name, click away, and click back to look for all the different matches if I don't remember a patient's full name, for example. I could also use these arrow buttons included in the patient and case data entry sheets to toggle through the different entries that were already in the database. And of course, I always want to hit my save buttons on the data entry sheets just to make sure whatever I entered in the data entry form gets transferred over into the database. So I'm going to go back to my home screen, and I want to show you what some of the raw data looks like. So I can use these buttons here to look at that. So anytime I want to look at more than one patient's information, I can click on patient list, case list, encounters list, or barriers list, or use the buttons. And this is basically the spreadsheet view. And I can also generate reports. So I'm going to go to my reports list, and this shows the 86 automatic reports templates that are included that should take no extra work to make, assuming that you have enable those variables that are needed for the report and have been collecting data for the report. The numbers should automatically go into these reports listed here for you. So they are grouped by patient, case, encounters, barriers, and those are the 4 different categories of reports that you have here on 4 separate sheets. So I'm going to just look at my patient reports here by clicking on Go to Patient Reports. So I have things like clients by intake month, or client counts by primary insurance, by age, years of education completed, and all sorts of demographic variables. And I would be able to look at my numbers for each year by selecting from this drop-down. So I have 2016 selected for now, and I'd always want to click Calculate Refresh just to make sure my numbers are current. And I can actually just go through, and each of the dashboards look fairly similar. So this is what it looks like for cases. Number of cases started or closed in a particular year, for instance, for current status, number of patients by stage or cancer type or treatment type. All that is listed here in case reports. And just to give one more example, I can look at my encounter reports to get a summary of, how many phone calls were made each month, or how many minutes were spent by my navigators on average each month, or what outcomes were achieved during each month, or how much time was spent each month on encounters by navigator or per patient. So there are really a lot of different reports that you can play with here. In addition to that, there are barrier reports, so you can count like how many communication barriers there were, or transportation barriers, how many actions the navigators took for each different category of reports, so resource referrals for care coordination barriers, etc. So there's really quite a lot you can do with the reports templates, but again, if there's a report that you are very interested in that hasn't been included, you have the option to build your own custom reports. If you are someone who's a little bit more familiar with Excel and comfortable with using pivot tables, we've included some for you here so that you can create your own. But if you're not familiar with it, you can also completely ignore it and don't worry about it. So those are basically the essential functions of the PN bot. If you run into any issues or have questions or any suggestions for us, you can contact us at navigation@gw.edu, and you could also visit our website. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your interest in PN bot. We hope you find it useful.